Okay, we can start now. Now we're going to take a large overlook of the broad landscape of audiophile productions. Mainly we're going to look at reissues, because that's the key point of this video actually. Then in the future we will see other videos where we have new productions with audiophile grade sound and physical characteristics of the vinyl. We're going to take a look at specific labels, but also specific characteristics of the production of these so-called audiophile grade records. Okay, so I would like to start with the currently produced Speaker's Corner production. These are fantastic releases. All of these releases and the audiophile albums we're going to take a look at are sourced from analog tapes. This is very important because that's the key to obtain the best sound possible, because we're talking about reissues of all albums coming from I would say the first part of the century all the way up to the 70s, 80s, or even the early 90s, I would say. Tape was in use until that period. So a lot of our production, of our historical music production, is recorded on tape. Hence, it is important to source these albums from analog tapes in order to have an A.A.A, a complete analog domain. So turning back to Speaker's Corners, this is a fantastic line of products. They have a lot of reissues, and the good part is that the price, although we are in the audiophile domain, is excellent. I think probably the best in terms of the ratio quality and price. So, for example, we have this, or Bill Withers, Just As I Am, or Mongo Santa Maria, Stone Soul. These are just a few examples, again, of Speaker's Corners. But obviously they also have classical music, like this edition of Peter and the Wolf. This was Speaker's Corner. Moving on, for example, we have here a nice edition of a recording, not very famous, I would say, but a very nice edition, a gatefold of a record from Concord Jazz. Concord is another excellent label which makes a lot of jazz or soul or this type of or singing vocal jazz, especially vocal jazz, I would say. And the characteristics is again to try to keep the whole process in analog domain. Like here we can see this is also a limited edition. In fact, we have high quality pressing on 180 gram vinyl. Deluxe inner sleeves, okay, that we don't care about that. Half speed mastering, that's something we're going to find a lot of times in our recordings, since the usual recording process takes place with the speed of the record, which is 33 1/3 revolutions per minute in this case. So if we have a half speed mastering, it means that the machine which is creating the groove from which we will obtain then the record goes at half speed, so it has all the time to have precision in doing his work. That's why usually it's better to do a half speed mastering. And as I said, not only they do this, a lot of labels do that. So this was a nice example of Concord. Another excellent label is the Reference Recordings. They do also a lot of digital editions. But again, as you can see here, half speed mastering. This is a 200 gram vinyl. I'm not a big fan of heavyweight vinyl, I must admit this. Also because a lot of editions of records coming from the 80s, 70s, where you do not have that philosophy. You have just a few normal grams, 100, 120 maximum, or even less actually. I think they sound just as good and sometimes even better. I'm not a big fan of heavyweight vinyl. And in fact, something I do not like in modern reissues, not audiophile reissues, is just to throw in a little bit of vinyl and say it's an audiophile edition just because it has a 180 gram. No, forget that. That is not, that's not a correct information. That is BS. I mean, just having a little more vinyl within the record is not going to help that much. For me, it's not going to help at all. So this is a great album. This is actually a reference album. A lot of people use this as a test disc in CDs, tape, etc. Excellent recording. We have also some information, obviously, on the director, on the recording itself. So this brand, this label, I think is very good. And as I said, they also do excellent digital products. Something very nice. Related to jazz. A lot of records we're going to take a look today are mainly within the jazz or classical ambient, I would say. Rock, pop reissues are obviously there, but they're treated in a lower percentage from all these labels. So turning back to this fantastic album of Francesco Cafizo, this album is made by one of the famous Japanese labels, the Venus. Remember that Japanese are completely crazy about audiophile. They're completely crazy about jazz. They love it. So all the recording machines, reel-to-reel tape recorders, special editions, they're constantly in search for these. Plus, they always make their own editions. Since the 50s or 60s, we have these special Japanese editions, which in most cases do sound best. The Japanese audiophile version sounds better than the normal edition, actually, in most cases. Obviously, unfortunately, these do cost much more. But this is not a reissue. This was issued in Venus. So great quality, nice silent vinyl, and let's see if we have a little more information. As you can see, this is all in Japanese, and this is, according to a lot of people, this is among one of the best typologies of vinyl and recordings. The Venus typology, the Venus label. Great stuff. It's difficult to find them, but if you do and the price is decent, I would say go for them. Absolutely. Let's proceed and let's take a look to this other album, which will give us a lot of more insight on two factors. This is a reissue of Pure Pleasure. Now, Pure Pleasure is another excellent label, like Speaker's Corner, which is reissuing, all their catalog is reissued with sourced by analog tapes. And obviously they're mastered and pressed. The whole process is within an analog domain. That's why these editions are so good. And as Speaker's Corner, Pure Pleasure also offers all his catalog, the A.A.A. catalog, with a decent, fantastic price. Quality ratio is exceptional, I would think. I think. So these and Speaker's Corners, which are currently selling now a lot of new reprints, reissues of classic albums, definitely check their catalog. Something else I wanted to say, since we're having this record with us, Vanguard. This is one of the best, absolutely the best recording label I ever heard. We're not talking about reissues. This album was issued by Vanguard. The most famous albums are probably those of Joan Baez. She was one of the few folk rock, let's say folk pop typology of production which was issued with Vanguard, because usually Vanguard goes with classical or jazz, or in this case folk blues. So if you find some kind of issue, some kind of record of Vanguard at a decent price, go for it, because those are incredible. Also, yes, also blues records. I have a John Hammond album, which is absolutely fantastic sonics. So obviously I'm not talking about a reissue. I'm talking about a label which was used, which unfortunately doesn't exist now, or it's not the original Vanguard of the old days. This was a fantastic album, a fantastic label. Vanguard, oh boy. Also, tapes made by Vanguard were incredible. Okay, so let's pass to other categories. I wanted to introduce the classic records issues. Unfortunately, classic records does not exist anymore. This was an audiophile label which was active, unfortunately, before the vinyl renaissance. So mainly during the, I would say the 80s, 90s, maybe the first years of the 2000s, but unfortunately then after that they closed, they shut down, and they reissued. They were specialized in reissuing famous albums. Again, almost all of them were sourced from analog recordings. Unfortunately, for example, I bought a Jethro Tull Aqualung edition of them, which obviously do cost a lot. These editions do cost a lot. And afterwards I discovered that their version of the Aqualung Jethro Tull album was not sourced by the original master tapes, unfortunately, because they couldn't find them in that moment. So be careful, you never know, you never know. They're famous for this process, which was picked up then from Quality Pressing Records. We will see that afterwards. But the QX SVP, this was their composition of vinyl, and also the process that was supposed to give a high quality, a high fidelity of the album. As you can see, again, we're talking about 200 grams. And in this case, instead, we have a lot of reissues of rock bands. Like, for example, these excellent albums of Led Zeppelin, which I highly recommend. Although there are a lot of reissues and the original pressings do not go for too much, so also check for those. Obviously, Classical Records also published other albums like this one of Lou Donaldson, so jazz, a lot of jazz, as you can imagine. So mainly jazz and rock. Changing subject, I wanted to introduce a different aspect regarding high quality audiophile grade records, which is the direct metal mastering. This is a direct metal mastering record. Here you can see the little logo, which you do not find this every time, so you kind of have to look for it. But this is an excellent process that came out during the 90s. Mainly developed by Newman and Teldec, the Telefunken-Decca. And a lot of albums were directly cut in a metal disc instead of acetate, which basically mean have better frequency response, and also you're jumping one step of the process, which will give even more fidelity. Even this typology recording of creation of the mother lacquer was applied also in other typologies of records. For example, this Black Sabbath Master of Reality edition is a DMM. If you're looking around in the used market, for example, and you pick this up, there is no sign of that. A good idea is to check directly the label, because in fact, as you can see here, it says DMM 41001. So only from this, I remembered that there was a DMM sticker on it telling me that this was realized with a direct metal mastering process. But unfortunately, if it's a used album, you're not going to know that. So if you find albums of every genre with the DMM logo, I think they're worth trying them because they're very good. Now we can move on to a great American classic, Mobile Fidelity sound. Oh yes, they've been going around since, I would say, at least the 60s. And they're specialized in reissuing great quality albums or famous albums, rock, jazz, classical, everything. They did cassettes, super audio CDs, the 20 karat gold CDs, and they're all highly collectible. And they're still going with their there are various typologies, various typologies of reedition. But let's say that they usually get one album, and they source the music from the original master tapes, obviously, from the analog tapes, and then they recreate their own albums. But that's not it. I mean, they're famous also for their half gain mastering process, half speed gain 2. Here you can see the logo, which see, as you can see, a lot of these are special editions, unfortunately, which means high prices. But the quality of these, I must say, is fantastic. Also, they go at a half speed, and they have this special, let's say, a gear that they developed, a proprietary gear to create these wonderful recordings. I must say that a few aren't that good, so check always on the internet, because you never know if that precise edition of Mobile Fidelity is actually one of the best. But usually there are. I mean, the quality is fantastic. As you can see here, half speed mastering, obviously 100 grams, etc., etc. So here's the Ultra Analog Gain 2. They're still using that typology of setup for their records. So these are pretty famous. This is probably the most popular typology of audiophile records out there. Another typology that I wanted to show you, which is not concerning a label, is actually the speed of records. We have already discussed about this. Sometimes these audiophile recordings labels, or even just normal record labels, sometimes they have the idea they want to try to issue albums with a 45 RPM speed, which is a great idea. It's a fantastic idea because, as we said a lot of times, the dynamics increase a lot. So the reproduction, the fidelity is absolutely fantastic. It's worth spending a few extra dollars or euro. So, for example, we have this last album of good old Slow Hand, which in fact Eric decided to go with the famous Glyn Johns. He also published a famous book now talking about all his mastering processes and stories, issues and stuff. And Surf Dog decided to issue this in a 45 RPM speed, and the result is fantastic. From the mastering of Glyn Johns, obviously the music of Eric Clapton, and this edition in 45 RPM, which does not cost very much more than the normal edition. So remember always to hunt, to check if there's something special, especially with people dedicated, which are interested in audiophile and high quality reproduction, as Eric Clapton is actually. Here we have an Italian label, Foné, which is mainly specialized in classical music, a little bit of jazz, almost none pop, soul, rock. No, I would say mainly classical music, and there are very, I would say, some maniacs of audiophile. They also publish a lot of super audio CDs. They were famous for those in the past years. And in this case, we have this fantastic edition in 45 revolutions per minute, which was directly cut by the proprietor of this this label, Signor Ricci. And the whole process is completely analog. Plus, a cool thing, I think, is that these editions, called the Club of the 496, what is this? Is the number of copies for each mother lacquer. Because when you reach the 500 copies of restamping from the mother lacquer, you're going to have a degradation in sound if you go over that. That's why they do only 496 copies for each matrix, guaranteeing in that way excellent quality, excellent sound. So I highly recommend this typology. Here, for example, we have another fantastic album, the Tony Bennett Bill Evans album, which is produced by Analog Productions, Also, this is a limited edition, and it was issued in a 45 revolutions per minute speed, which I must say greatly increases the quality of this album. Last but not least, I would like to give you some examples of the best label out there. I think almost all the people around, a lot of audiophiles will agree that Analog Productions is the best audiophile label out there, because the whole process is completely analog and conducted in a very high quality way. The mastering, obviously, everything is sourced from the analog tapes. They try to keep the purest signal with the best machines. Almost all of their pressings is done by Quality Pressings, which is among the best pressing plants on the globe. I mean, everything is maniacally delivered in an optimal and analog way. They do the best of the best, I must say that. So let's see some examples. For example, they reissued recently this, the Royal Ballet, directed by Anserme of the Living Stereo RCA Victor label, which the original version is hunted by audiophiles, which cost hundreds and hundreds of dollars. And their re-edition, which this is a double album, which has cost a little more. I think it's around $70, $80. It's fabulous. I mean, equal or better than the original of 1959. So as you can see here, this is the famous logo of Analog Productions, and also the logo of Quality Pressings. Moving ahead, here we can see another reissue of Living Stereo. Obviously, apart from Analog Productions, always look in terms of high quality classical records. The Living Stereo ones are the best of the best. If you like classical music, start from these. Otherwise, you're going to be disappointed from bad recordings or things like that. So this is a re-edition of Analog Productions. They issued almost all of the RCA Living Stereo records, which obviously already sounded fantastic, amazing. With their enhancement, I'd say it's even more astounding. Here we can see one of the best re-editions they recently issued, which is this record of the masterpieces of Ellington. Also, other houses reissued this recently. There's also a 45 RPM version. This is the 33 RPM, but it is absolutely fantastic. This record was recorded in 1951, but the sonics of this record is something amazing, astounding. Absolutely, highly recommend. This is a reference recording for a lot of people, in fact. I've already showed you this record in another video. It's worth showing again. Nina Simone, this is a reissue. I think it's her second record. Fantastic. Little Girl Blue. Again, Analog Productions. Very high quality editions. As you can see, also the gatefolds, the sleeve is always in heavy cardboard. Also the sleeves are very, you can see they're high quality. Every aspect is absolutely perfect. Obviously, the cost is what it is. I mean, they do cost a lot, unfortunately. I think you can buy one every once in a while and truly enjoy that. As you can see, they also reissued recent stuff like this almost forgotten album of Taj Mahal. And the acoustic sound of the guitar, of his voice is something amazing. I mean, this reissue, which is from 1996, so rather recent, I must say, is a fantastic album. Absolutely. These, like all the ones of Analog Productions, which I highly recommend. Good stuff, guys. Good stuff. Okay, guys, in this last part of the video, I want to explore a few other important labels dedicated to reissues, to vinyl reissues sourced on the original master tapes, which are worth, I think, spending a few words on. So let's take a look. First of all, we have here Org Music, which has a nice catalog, subdivided, as you can see, in jazz, blues releases, but also country, rockabilly, and rock pop. In fact, you'll find classic editions like Red Clay, Freddie Hubbard, Jim Hall Concerto, a few albums of Coltrane, and things like that. So this is absolutely a fantastic label for this typology of records. Not only, as you can see here, also great American classics, Johnny Cash, Carl Perkins, and things like that, and also a few rock albums, including a nice re-edition of Nevermind by Nirvana, sourced from original master tapes. So not bad. Moving ahead, we have another org label, which is different though. Do not mistake this with this. This is a different label. It's the Original Recording Group, which unfortunately I don't know why they don't have their website online. So I'll just go to the Discogs page, where you can see some info of this group, and they have excellent editions as well of jazz, vocal jazz, but also rock, pop, soul, a little bit of everything. And their editions are also fantastic. They also do classical music. So this is an excellent label, re-edition label. Moving on, we also have this newly created label, Analog Spark, which is reissuing a few albums, also as you can see in SAD, but also in vinyl, and also some albums out of the 90s which had were never issued in vinyl. Also, I think an album of the Cranberries, for example, and things like that. It's a nice label. They're just starting, but it's a nice label to take your eye on, keep your eye on it. Moving ahead, we also have Impix Records, which is also an excellent label. They have a nice catalog, again, mainly based on, as you can see, jazz, but also some classical music, folk music, Belafonte, Billy Joel, a little bit of everything. It's not a huge catalog, but they're nice editions. They also have some super audio CDs. Reno is also an excellent place to look for original master tape reissues. As you can see, I made a search master tapes because obviously they reissue also a lot of new, a lot of digital material. But in this case, we do have excellent editions sourced from master tapes. Like, for example, here you can see the Division Bell, and so on. And a lot of these albums are mastered by excellent engineers like Doug Sachs, for example. Because unfortunately, when these artisans, I would say, when these people are not going to be around anymore, I don't know if we're going to be able to do this, because they have excellent gear, excellent experience, knowledge, and once they're gone, it's really going to be difficult. I hope they're passing on their knowledge, their experience. So moving on, we can take a look at another interesting label, Testament of MII, and they're specialized mainly in classical music. And the good thing, as you can see, is that the prices finally are decent, even though they're audiophile, and sourced from the original master tapes. I mean, there are a few editions here that would cost you an arm and a leg if you went for the original issue. So an excellent brand, which is a little overlooked, I think. It's not that renowned, but their products are absolutely excellent, although they're specialized in classical music. And finally, we're going to move through one of the best, Music Matters, which they mainly reissue Blue Note jazz albums. As you can see, they have a whole catalog on 45 RPM speed, which is very interesting and also very expensive, but also on 33. And their re-editions are among the best, I would say, even though unfortunately they all are extremely expensive. So if we take a look at their re-editions, we find fantastic albums. Also, Blue Train of John Coltrane, which is already sold out, unfortunately, but also Midnight Blue, which is one of the top records. I highly suggest this. This is fantastic. As you can see, they also put an image the original master tape they used for reissuing all these albums, and these are, I must say, amazing. So that's it, guys. Okay, guys, I hope you enjoyed this video. Please write down here in the comments your suggestions, your tips on audiophile grade records, or simply records you reputate of high quality, high fidelity. Because ultimately that's what we're looking for. It doesn't have to be tube gear or special microphones or special pressing, always and 100% analog to be an excellent recording. No, absolutely. Although certain parameters must be respected in order to have a high quality recording. We don't want crap. We don't want crapola. We want high quality. And if audiophile is usually the avenue to do this, good. But there isn't always that path. And I know you can greatly help by posting under here your suggestions. Well, thank you again for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video, guys, and hope to see you soon. Bye!